All right, Natalie, pleasure having you on. Let's just start it with the interview. Can you start out with a brief introduction about yourself and how you found Bitcoin?
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Natalie Brunell. I host a podcast called Coin Stories, and I'm really a Bitcoin educator. I come from a mainstream news background. I used to be an investigative reporter and anchor for about a decade. And along my journey of reporting, I stumbled upon Bitcoin thanks to some friends who were investing in it back in 2017. And when I first learned about it, I was very skeptical. I thought I would essentially probably lose any money that I put into it. I conflated Bitcoin with all the other tokens. And I really had to be humbled by learning about Bitcoin because I didn't realize that I would also go on this incredible knowledge journey of learning about our financial system and what money is and how banking works. And that was an experience that was really eye-opening because before that, when I was a reporter, I saw that things were deteriorating in society and the cost of living was obviously going up. That was impacting me as well as the people I would interview. But I just felt like people were just becoming more polarized and frustrated. And I associated a lot of it with politics. I thought, oh, this is kind of like a red or a blue issue. And everyone's just getting more greedy and corrupt. I didn't realize that at the base layer of all of our economic interactions, the money is so broken, and Bitcoin is really the best solution we have and that has the best potential to fix a lot of these issues. So became really passionate about it, started my podcast in 2021 as totally a hobby, and I can't believe 3 years later it's my full-time job. I'm so grateful.
Great. So, how did your friends and family react when you started down the Bitcoin rabbit hole? Were they like, "Oh, you're wasting your time. That's a scam," or were they like pretty supportive of you?
It was a mix. So the people that I learned about it from, they looked at it more as a speculative asset that they traded. Some of them held on, but they weren't really that far down the rabbit hole saying that this was going to fix the world. I would try to pitch stories about Bitcoin to my news outlets, and they would kind of be wary of allowing me to do that. They were worried that I was basically promoting something that people could lose a lot of money if they invested in. My family at the time just thought, no, this is digital, it could be hacked. But I did have a mentor who I started to have very thoughtful conversations with him about Bitcoin. And he ultimately is the person who gave me the book, The Bitcoin Standard. And that was sort of my aha moment where I thought, oh my gosh, there's something here. I need to learn everything I can about it. This potentially addresses so many of the problems that I report on that people are facing. And so it was definitely a mix, but I'm so grateful that I had someone who said, no, you really need to look into this, read this book because Bitcoin, there's actually something here.
Can you share a particularly memorable experience or interview from your career?
In news or in Bitcoin?
Both.
Sure. I mean, I had a lot of I'm so grateful that I've had the chance to interview so many different people. When I was a news reporter, I covered everything from city hall meetings to entertainment stories on the red carpet to really interesting investigative pieces. So I got to learn a lot. I was on a lot of, I covered a lot of campaigns and elections, learned a lot about politics. But I would say the most memorable from my news career is really being on the front lines reporting on public corruption and really peeling back the layers of just how politicians who get a little bit too greedy and decide to use their position to basically benefit themselves at the expense of the taxpayers. I got to see how that actually works and learned a lot about how the sausage is made. And that was really fulfilling because I got to sort of hold them accountable through my career. And those were the stories that I think made the most impact. And then on the Bitcoin side, I mean, I'm so grateful that I've gotten to interview my mentors and the people that I really learned from, like Saifedean, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, Michael Saylor, who was the first CEO of a publicly traded company to put Bitcoin in the treasury, Lynn Alden, who's an incredible strategist and investment advisor, Preston Pish, Jeff Booth. So I can't really name just one because they're all so fantastic.
So you have conducted hundreds of interviews and speeches. How did you learn to become so articulate?
Well, that's very nice. We're all our own worst critics. So sometimes I watch myself and still cringe, and I wish I could do it over, because when you're live and you don't know what the question's going to be, you can only try your best and hope that you remember everything you want to say. But it's really about practice. So when I was a news reporter, I would have to go live with a story every single day, multiple times a day. So at the beginning of my career, I was literally live with a news story. I would come in the door at 2 p.m. and then I would be live at 5, 5:30, 6, 6:30, 10, and 11. So it was just a lot of repetition, getting comfortable, messing up, but learning from your mistakes. And I think that that's the best way for anyone to learn any skill, is just practice, practice, do it over, repetition, and you improve with each time that you do something.
What was your idea behind the Coin Stories podcast?
Yeah, so I was learning about Bitcoin. I was learning from people who came from all different backgrounds. And I was really fascinated that so many smart people from different walks of life, different industries, came to the conclusion that Bitcoin is going to fix so many of the problems that are happening in society. So I was very curious. I've always loved origin stories and biographies. And I was doing another podcast as a hobby at the time called Career Stories, where I would interview successful people in media and politics and social media about their backgrounds and journeys and how they achieved success and what obstacles they overcame. And I really loved that, because I just learned so much about who the people were behind the pages, the headlines, the big followings. And that's what I wanted to do for Bitcoin. I felt like when I was watching a lot of the shows or consuming the Bitcoin educational material that I was consuming, I didn't know who the people were behind them. I'm like, where did they come from? How did they find Bitcoin? Why did they believe in it so much? How did they build their careers prior to Bitcoin? So I just decided to DM them and see if they would talk to me. Again, I had no intention of the podcast actually becoming my career. And luckily enough, a lot of them said yes, and that's what got the show started.
So what excites you the most about Bitcoin?
The thing that excites me most about Bitcoin is that right now, I think a lot of people recognize that there is something broken, that there are many injustices in the system, that the rich keep getting richer, the poor keep getting poorer, no matter how hard they work. And that feels wrong. It feels like there should be more hope and opportunity, especially for young people. And I think Bitcoin offers that hope. It sort of allows us to reorient our system, especially our economic system, in a way that is based on rules and no special advantages, no matter who you are, how much money you have. It's really about following the rules and the right incentives so that we all compete on a level playing field. And I think from there, real value can emerge, and we can compete in a way that really incentivizes the best of us to come out, the best of human potential and cooperation and innovation and entrepreneurship. I think a lot of it has been squashed because we have a system that rewards those at the very top and the monopolies who are able to essentially get more money because they're closer to the money printer. And so I have a lot of hope that we can build a more prosperous, abundant, and really just a beautiful world where a lot of us get to do things that we never thought we were able to do, because we've sort of been burdened by the current system and how limited it feels.
Can you talk about your experience interviewing the president of El Salvador?
Sure. So I flew down there. It was my second trip to El Salvador. This was in 2022. And I had the chance to have a one-on-one meeting with him. He's obviously the first president of a country to legalize Bitcoin as tender. And he was fascinating. I thought that he was very thoughtful in how much effort he undertook to learn about Bitcoin. We talked about Saifedean's books. I think Saifedean, the author of the Bitcoin and Fiat Standard, is now an advisor in El Salvador, because the president really took to his writings and his educational work, which was really great. But he's really a student of economic theory. I mean, we talked about Austrian economics. He talked about Ray Dalio's works. He follows a lot and observes things very closely. And he shared a little bit about his background as well, what his father meant to him, and just he comes from a business background. He was a business owner prior to being elected, and so he really wants people to be economically empowered, and he wants his country to to succeed and to prosper and not be tainted by a legacy of violence and corruption and poverty. And so he seemed very genuine in wanting to turn things around because he knows that that will be part of his own legacy. Now, I'm very wary about putting politicians on a pedestal because you never know, and they so often break our trust. So I think, I'm cautiously optimistic always about anyone who says they're pro Bitcoin, who's in a position of power, but I have a lot of hope that he is genuine. And I have seen a lot of things turn around there. And the people I met in El Salvador feel a lot of hope and opportunity. And they speak very positively about him and the changes that have taken place. So overall, I'm really positive and hopeful about where El Salvador is going. And if they're right about Bitcoin, which I think they are, I think they're going to be in a really good position, a position of more economic strength than they ever have been.
So when you were in El Salvador, like how did you see the merchants, taking Bitcoin, as like a payment system? Like since you had boots on the ground, like can you talk about your experience in that?
Yeah, so it really depends where you go because some areas are really, really familiar and comfortable with Bitcoin. There's a circular Bitcoin economy that a lot of people are familiar with in El Zante, which is also known as Bitcoin Beach. So if you go there, I mean, literally all the merchants want you to pay them in Bitcoin. They have the different wallets. They're very familiar with it. They talk about Bitcoin. They're very engaged with the topic. Then when you go to a bigger city, like let's say El Salvador, I went to a mercado there when I was shooting a documentary there. And people are a little bit more skeptical. They were a little bit wary about the Chivo wallet. They didn't really know how it worked. A lot of them, when they received Bitcoin in the Chivo wallet, that's the national wallet, they just traded it immediately to US dollars. They sold it to US dollars. So, I think just more education needs to be done because understandably, when you don't know about something, your first instinct is going to be to maybe push it away or worry that there's something bad about it. So completely understandable. So that area, I think, just needs a little bit more educational outreach, which hopefully is happening. But depending on where you go, it's sort of a mixed bag.
So one of your sponsors is BitDeer. Can you discuss any significant developments in sustainable mining practices?
Yeah, so BitDeer, it's been really interesting to learn about the ecosystem and how it's changing and evolving. BitDeer is really focused on being a technology forward company. They have a huge portion of their team dedicated to research and development. And so they're really, focused on pushing the boundaries of cloud mining, of AI. They have a partnership with NVIDIA, and sustainability has always been really important to them. So they're using wasted energy in places like Norway. They've developed partnerships with nation states like Bhutan. So a lot of things that are really exciting on a global scale to push Bitcoin mining and make sure that policymakers are really aware that this is something that can strengthen the grid, that can be extremely sustainable and renewable as far as energy resources go. And it's something that can strengthen the nation state and sovereign wealth funds as well. So it's been a really good partnership. I'm very grateful for their support so that I can keep the show and the content going and keep it all for free.
Yeah, you recently did an interview with the guy who created like a Bitcoin miner that can also heat your home.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about like some projects that you believe that can like get people closer to Bitcoin adoption? Because now you could basically get free heat, right?
Yeah, so these are some really interesting developments because so many people have felt like Bitcoin mining is out of reach for them because they don't have the ability to buy one of these sophisticated ASIC devices to mine. They're very expensive, they're very, loud, they use up a lot of energy. But there are companies and founders out there who are trying to build more sort of at-home friendly Bitcoin mining devices and appliances. Like, so one of the companies that I did talk to recently, they're trying to create home appliances that mine Bitcoin, including a space heater. So I'm waiting for mine. I want to see and test how it works. But I think it's incredible to think that in the future you could have, things that you would normally use that obviously use up energy that are also mining a little bit of Bitcoin. Maybe you're connected to a Bitcoin mining pool. And I think it's important because the more miners that we have, especially individuals that are able to mine, the more decentralized and secure the network is. And I think everyone should run a node. I think everyone, if they're able to, to contribute and to be able to mine, I think it's great for the whole network. It's very accretive. We don't want to move in the direction of centralization. And I think it's inspiring. I joked with the founder. I would hope that someday my blow dryer or something can mine Bitcoin, or some of the appliances that I use in the kitchen, because that would be so cool. We're probably very far away from that, but there are a lot of people that are just really thinking, 10, 20 years ahead about what's possible with Bitcoin mining.
You better patent that before he steals that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, or Dyson Airwrap. That's what all the girls want. I joked, everyone doesn't know whether to spend money on the Dyson Airwrap because it's very expensive, but it's a great blow dryer, or to stack sats and buy Bitcoins. I was joking that we could have both in one.
So what advice would you give to someone curious about Bitcoin and just starting out?
I would say don't be intimidated, especially by the technical components, because at the very, very start of my educational journey, I was worried that I wasn't technical enough to understand Bitcoin. I didn't have a computer science or programming background, and it's really not too difficult to learn. It really is. It really is simple, honestly. And when you're explained things in a way that can be understood, you realize how simple and elegant Bitcoin actually is. It's core technology, and it's really exciting, and it really feels empowering. It does offer a lot of hope. I was someone who, through my career and just working hard, I was trying to really make it and save for my future. I started to feel a lack of hope about whether I was ever going to afford a house or to be able to have a family. I was getting very scared and anxious about my future, and Bitcoin has helped turn that around for me and made me feel very positive about where we could go, especially if everyone embraces Bitcoin and like I said, fixes the core problem we have in society, which is how unfair and broken our monetary system is.
So what do you think are like the biggest hurdles to Bitcoin adoption by the general public? You think it's like the high price, the self-custody? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a combination. I think a lot of people don't understand money, especially here in the West, where our payments networks, they work fine, right? We go to the store, we pay for our coffee, we probably put it on a debit or credit card. We don't think about the back end and how fragmented really the infrastructure behind all of it is. So we don't really appreciate the problem that exists. Also, some people have done really well in the world of fiat saving through real estate or through stock portfolios. And so they don't really appreciate how broken that, it's really asset inflation that they've benefited from, which crushes the everyday person and the working class. So there's a lack of understanding about that. They think that Bitcoin's too technical. They worry about self-custody and some risks that are associated with losing your Bitcoin. I think that they hear negative headlines about Bitcoin using too much energy, which is not true. Or they've heard about the Bitcoin affiliate, the people who are in the crypto space, not Bitcoin, who have scammed people out of money, and they worry that Bitcoin's affiliated with that. So I think there are a lot of hurdles. And to your point about Bitcoin being too expensive, a lot of people think you have to buy a whole Bitcoin, and that's obviously not true. You can buy Satoshis, you could buy $1 worth or a yen or a euro worth of Bitcoin. So I think more education is going to help ease people's skepticism about Bitcoin.
Yes. So you alluded to this concept earlier, but what are your thoughts on the saying, fix the money, fix the world?
I mean, I think that the greatest problem that people face around the world is not being economically empowered and being so worried about taking care of themselves in the present that they can't plan for the future. I know that it's something that's not really Bitcoin related, but when you're able to save, you can drop your time preference. And time preference is one of the most fascinating terms and subjects that I learned about when I was trying to understand Bitcoin. It's this idea that if you're so panicked about just making ends meet and living paycheck to paycheck and paying off your debts, you're really in this anxious, short-term thinking state of mind and state of being. And good things don't really come from that, because you're more likely to just kind of, panic purchase things because you know that they're probably going to go up and get more expensive later. You might not be incentivized to be as cooperative with people around you. If you're really desperate, you might turn to things like crime or grift in order to just, try to get what you feel you're owed. I don't think that that's healthy for an economy, a society, for all of our well-beings. I think when you're able to lower your time preference and think about the future and really plan, you can start to make decisions that are better for not just yourself, but everyone around you. You can take more chances. You can start projects you didn't think that you were going to be able to start. You can, you can make the life of the people that you care for better. And that's what I think is so important about Bitcoin, is just allowing us to not be so short-term driven, short-term thinking, short-term decisions, and really start thinking about the long run and the impacts that we're going to have and the legacies we're going to leave. And so education is really core to that, because the more that we're educated, the more that we're empowered as well. But the economic side is so important, because people need to have savings so that they can stop stressing about everything, paycheck to paycheck and day to day.
So do you think the American dream is still alive or just changed? Because I've heard like the new American dream is to leave, right? Go to like a cheaper country, have like a location independent income. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think with Bitcoin, I honestly believe that it's just becoming more of a universal dream that everyone wants. I mean, it's called the American dream because America represented it so well and for so long and had the most opportunity and hope. But it brought people from around the world because everyone seeks that. I mean, the American dream was really the idea that you can come from anywhere, any background. You could come from total poverty and you can make something of yourself. You can make your dreams come true. You can achieve whatever you want if you work hard and you're a good person, and you create something of your own and you get to keep it. I think that a lot of that has been lost, and the American dream, the strength and the hope in it has been on the decline because people work really hard and they're still not able to make it. And young people, they graduate from college, they're loaded with student loan debt and they don't know how to repay it and how to kind of catch up or get ahead. And that leaves you feeling like you're treading water. And that isn't the American dream. I think the American dream will become a dream for every country where people are adopting Bitcoin and are, again, able to save and make decisions where everything's sort of getting cheaper for them. Like that's really how things should be. And I urge people to read the book Price of Tomorrow, because Jeff Booth is so articulate and eloquent in talking about our system of inflation, which is really asset inflation and debt and expanding ever more amounts of credit, as opposed to the deflation that technology is supposed to bring about, so that our lives are easier and things are cheaper and more efficient every single year. And those two worlds are really incompatible. A system built on credit and ever expanding debt and inflation is not compatible with the deflation that technology brings. So we're really at an inflection point, and Bitcoin can smooth out that transition and allow us to create a system that is more peaceful and one that has prosperity and abundance. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future.
So I also like how you interview people totally opposed to Bitcoin, like Peter Schiff. What makes you want to hear the other side of a story?
Well, I mean, as a journalist, I always had to interview both sides, people I agreed with or didn't agree with, people who were very for something, as well as the people very against it, while remaining very neutral. I'm not neutral about Bitcoin. I'm very for it, but I think that everyone who speaks out against Bitcoin either doesn't understand it, which I think is the majority of people, like they don't fully understand it, or they benefit from being against it. Like there's some sort of agenda behind it. And so I want to hear them out, because I think that the more that we hear arguments, we strengthen our position to be able to respond to those arguments and articulate why Bitcoin is so legitimate and important. So I think it's helpful, and it never hurts to orange pill more people, because you never know when one conversation will help change someone's mind. And I think it's really inspiring when people who were so against it at one time, including Michael Saylor, who tweeted that it was like going to go the way of, I think, sports gambling or something in 2013 is what he tweeted. To see them make a turnaround and admit that, they needed to learn a little bit more, and to see them humbled by the process of learning about Bitcoin, I think it's awesome. I think there's nothing better. And there aren't enough people, especially public figures and politicians, who are just admit, you know what, I needed to learn a little bit more and I've changed my position and now I agree, or whatever. I think a lot of people sometimes are very stubborn and driven by ego, and they will not change no matter what they dig their heels in, even though they know that, we have some points. Bitcoiners are always, I think, trying to bring out the people who say that they're against Bitcoin, but we think that they're just waiting to be proponents.
So would you say like Bitcoin is kind of like a one-way door where if once you enter and you understand the truth, you can't really go back to the lie?
Yeah. And I don't know if a lot of people who are watching this who are Bitcoiners feel this way, but Bitcoin has definitely changed me. I mean, now I look at the world really differently. I look at stories from a different point of view, and I see more layers of context that I didn't see prior. And I do look at people who are completely in the dark as like not being enlightened. And I just want to help get them through the door because there's so much light and hope through that door. And a lot of people around the world, they're fighting with each other, and everything has gotten so politically charged, and it's like it's this person's fault and that person's fault, and we're arguing about all the symptoms and not addressing the root cause. And if you're just going to kind of band-aid over symptoms, right, you're always going to have that problem until you address the root cause of it. So yeah, it's been interesting to see people's reactions, but I think that pretty soon more and more people will start to understand, and more of us will be on the same page.
Do you think people are more inclined to trust traditional news sources or rely on alternative media or citizen journalism?
Well, I think the data is pointing to the fact that fewer people are trusting the mainstream institutions, including legacy media. And for me, it's been an interesting journey because I really grew up in that world, and that was my experience. And so one thing that I experienced a few years into my career was feeling like I didn't fully fit in and belong because my views didn't match what all the news networks were starting to share. And I felt like there was a lot of implicit bias. And I was worried, I was concerned, because I felt like journalism was a very noble profession, and we really have a duty and a responsibility to inform the public. And if we don't give them all the information, including the sides that might be controversial or might be speaking out against the government or certain agencies, then we're really doing a great disservice. And for media and information to be corrupted by politics, that's a very, very dangerous place. My parents grew up under communism, and so I really learned a lot from their stories because I worried greatly that we could potentially head in that direction of just control, because people fear and they want convenience and safety, and that generally pulls you in the direction of authoritarianism. And my parents understood what that meant and how limited your freedoms were and the fear that comes with it. So I've really learned a lot being a reporter and a journalist, and I'm very grateful that the internet allowed for the democratization of information and media so that I could literally work for myself. And technology being deflationary, I could create a broadcast studio in my own home, which was not possible 20 years ago, and everything had just a few gatekeepers. And in the same way, I think finance and savings and money will be democratized through Bitcoin.
What role do you think AI will have on the news and reporting? Do you think there will be a lot of false flags or misinformation and people need to fact check more in the upcoming world?
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about it. I mean, AI is starting to look so real. I actually covered this right before I left my job. I was doing some stories on deep fakes and investigating the technology behind that, and it was crazy how real the videos looked. I mean, they would take political figures and heads of state, and they would change their mouths so it looked like they were saying something, and that could be very dangerous. I mean, could you imagine if a big X account for a large state agency was compromised, and you had a state leader on video appearing to say that they were going to war or something like that? I mean, that would be extraordinarily dangerous. And so that's one of the reasons why I do think that Bitcoin will have many applications outside of just being a monetary asset. I think it also has a lot of implications when it comes to national and cybersecurity, because cryptographically we can verify what videos are real and what are not. Because the real one, you would be able to see if it was signed by the user's private key that was affiliated with the head of the state or that agency. So I think it's really important that in a world of AI and deep fakes and fake news and all of that, that we have tools by which we can see what is actually true. And I think people do need to be careful what they're seeing, what they trust. Like, make sure, don't trust, verify. Verification is extremely important. And I do see a lot of challenges, but also a lot of positive developments in the future. But people definitely need to be more careful.
Do you have any big projects or ideas in the works that you would like to share? Maybe a book?
Yes, I am slowly but surely working on a book. I think that there are so many fantastic pieces of education and books out there about Bitcoin, and so I'm hoping to contribute my voice. There aren't a lot of books written by women authors, and really geared toward a very general public, like your mom, your dad, your granddaughter that's graduating from college, your grandmother. And I really want to speak to that audience, because when I was a reporter, that's who my audience was when I was working in television. It wasn't someone who had a specific expertise in finance or engineering or computer science. It was really just like the average person coming home from a long day at work and wanting to be informed. And so I just want to simplify what Bitcoin is, but also the problem that it solves. Like, why does Bitcoin exist, and why do we all need it, and why does everyone really want to learn about it? So slowly but surely, hopefully it'll come together sometime later this year or next year.
Great. So for the final question, thank you very much for your time, Natalie. How can people reach out to get in touch with you or follow your content?
Sure. So again, my show is called Coin Stories. It's on YouTube, Twitter, all the platforms. I also have a free newsletter. You can get that at nataliebrunell.substack.com. It's weekly. You can read it in less than 10 minutes and understand what's happening with the global economy as well as Bitcoin. And I'm very active on social media. So definitely, reach out. My DMs are open. Sometimes I'm a little slow to get to them, but I always try to respond.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you.